Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Free-for-All-Friday edition of the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is November 3rd, in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control. He does love you, and we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show. Knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade folks of the truth, and I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. Nice day. It was actually warmed up yesterday. It's warm today. I have a really good show for you planned today. The GOP tax plan from Congress is finally out. Now, a lot of people get confused about this. President Trump was proposing a tax cut plan that he sent to Congress, but only Congress can actually do the bills. You know, they're the ones that pay the bills. They're the ones that can actually introduce legislation for spending. So technically it's a GOP tax plan, although the president, and this happens all the time, folks, the president actually proposed it, and the GOP is running with this. And the theme of the show today is we're going to be talking about, in the title I put down, is tax cuts expand freedom and freedoms. Tax cuts expand freedoms. And this is something that you're going to hear a lot. You're going to hear a lot from the anti-freedom folks in the progressive movement, especially groups like Indivisible Group and Common Cause. They have been very vocal on social media, although they're not that big, yet they're fairly vocal on social media about the GOP and the Trump tax plan, how it's a scam. They call it the Trump tax scam. And Robert B. Reich, or as I'm starting to call him BB Reich, he likes to use debunked studies, debunked facts about the Reagan era tax cuts. You'll hear a lot of terms, and this happened after the Reagan era tax cuts, and they were talking about how this is just voodoo economics. And the one thing a lot of people don't know about Ronald Reagan was he was an economist. That's what he got his degree in at college. So he knew a thing or two about the economy, and I couldn't point a finger to this, but just from what I've been reading about him and studying him over the years, I would have to put him in the camp of at least the Chicago School of Economics, if not in the Austrian School of Economics. So I think he might be a cross between the two. So it's, and that's not a real big point. What's at issue here is you'll hear the folks on the, on the anti-freedom side of this that are against any type of tax cuts, because it's going to make it will drive the government smaller. And I have an article here today, if we get to it, it's about Vox. They're a very, very left-leaning news group. And the title of it is No Vox, Smaller Government Does Not Mean White Nationalism. Everything, and this is going to be a problem for the anti-freedom folks in this country, but everything they see is racist. It's all racist. If you're anti-immigrant, you're a racist, even though, we have all sorts of races that are coming in as immigrants, and that, like I said, they just throw that word up there because it's one of those catchphrases. It's one of those words that they use for fear and intimidation, especially for people who are sitting on the fence. As it were, and I was told, I made some comments on Facebook about, Islamic terrorists and stuff like that, and we need to, I think it's a good thing to ban more people from I get this right, Dave, Uzbekistan, and I was called a racist. And yet if you take the time, just like when you call somebody a Mexican, or you don't want Mexicans coming into the country, we want to build a wall. Oh, you being racist. But 6% of the population is Caucasian white. And then it breaks down from there, other skin colors, as it were. So again, they're using scare tactics to try to scare those that are on the fence to their side. Oh, I don't want to be associated with this racist, even though what you said has nothing to do with race. If I call you a dirty, rotten, bow-legged American, I'm not being racist. I might be other things, but I'm not being racist because America is not a race. Being Mexican is not about a race. You know, there are people who talk this way. And this comes, especially those in the Democrat Party that talk this way. They are, again, this is one of these things I'm going to buy the book, Rules for Radicals. You know, because I was watching a video with Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad on the internet, and he was going over the book, The Rules of Radicals, and it was amazing to me how we could actually conservatives could actually use these rules against them in these rules for radicals. But one of the rules is you blame them for something you're doing. You know, you're deflecting blame off of you because you're blaming somebody else for something you are doing. And so when I hear Democrats or progressives or the anti-freedom folks out there saying, well, you're just being a racist nationalist or white nationalist, deep down in their little democratic hearts, they are the ones that are actually being the race purists because of their history and how they haven't really escaped that history. And we see it. It was one way. It was race purists against blacks because they were the Democrats were the ones that came out and created the Jim Crow laws, segregation, was against freeing the slaves to begin with, you know, the whole 9 yards. And they have this racist lineage up through the ages. You know, the KKK was their militant arm of the Democrats. Margaret Sanger, the patriarch of Planned Parenthood, and looked upon by feminists and, you know, in the anti-freedom movement out there as to be, you know, almost holy, was a daughter of the KKK and was one of the most racist, vile human beings you'd ever want to listen to. And yet they hold her up as an example of what they need to be doing. You know, as far as Planned Parenthood, all this is reproductive rights. You men keep your fingers and hands off of that, not thinking about and not caring about that that's a human being in your womb that has every right to live as you do. So, you know, I don't want to get off subject here on that, but you see where I'm getting at. You know, you see what's going on here now. So you're going to hear all these things about the taxes, you know, and about how they're going to be bad for everybody. And again, don't listen to me. Don't listen to them. Go out and do your own research. And folks, I've made your research easy. All you got to do is go over to danclemenshow.com and click on the show notes page for this episode. 919 is the episode, or you can go by the date if you want to write down the date of November 3rd. But I have links to all the articles that I get my research out of. How much easier can that be? You don't even have to go DuckDuckGo it. You know, you can just go to the danclemenshow.com, click on the episode page, and scroll down and look what I have in there. And hopefully it's a good resource for you. Hopefully people are using this resource. And there are going to be some changes to the website. You know, I used to put them up as everything up as just a post, and then put the audio feed into the post. But I'm switching everything over. You're not going to lose the old post, but from after this program here, starting with Monday's show, everything's actually going to show up, and you won't notice it that much. I'm just telling you, the format on the page is going to change a little bit, but you won't notice it that much. But I'll actually be putting up the podcast with the show notes and everything in that. Like I said, you won't notice hardly a difference, but I'm making that change over the weekend because I've got everything set up. I'm waiting for them to put everything from Blog Talk Radio over on their site. I don't know how long it's going to take to do that. And just everybody make a note of this. Over the weekend, I'm going to put a note on Blog Talk Radio. Today is my last live broadcast on Blog Talk Radio. And I also put the links up. Most people get their, they download from Stitcher or iTunes because they have those. A lot of people have iPhones, so they already have that set up on their iPhones to download my podcast. And a lot of people use Stitcher, and then in the future here, you're going to be able to just go to, there's going to be an RSS feed button on there. You can go to that and use your podcast aggregator on your computer like I do. I use GPotter. It's an open source, very, very good program, and so you'll be able to get that. So to keep the ideas of freedom flowing here, and I'll be putting it out on Facebook and Twitter about the change in format and the getting off of Blog Talk Radio, saving me some moolah in the process, and not having to deal with the technical difficulties, not going to have to deal with all the statistical difficulties that I've had with them. So hopefully my page stats are looking good. They're actually climbing up. They're consistent. And I won't say consistently high, but they're just consistent. They're not up and down like Blog Talk Radio's is. So we'll see what happens here in the future. But getting back to, I know I went off on a tangent there, but I was just thinking about those there. So we're going to talk a lot about the tax plan today, so we're going to get into it here. There's some other things we're going to get into before that. I'm just going to go over this real quick after the advertisement and everything, after our sponsors of the show. Democrats file further impeachment charges against Trump, so we'll open that up and look into that. I also have an update from that nurse back in July that was arrested for not allowing the police to draw blood off of a patient, even though he had to have a warrant to do so. I got an update on that. I think, not that I'm against police, and I'm not, but guys, gals that are police folks out there, do it by the book. Just because you got a badge and a gun doesn't mean you have all the authority. And in this case, the police officer didn't. And I'll tell you how much it's going to cost the police department or their insurance carriers out there. So, all right. The official drink of the Dan Clemens Show is the Rocky Mountain High brand drink. It's a hemp-infused drink, 100 milligrams of hemp oil, CBC oil, in every 16-ounce can. They have black tea, they have mango energy, they have a berry energy drink, they have a coconut lime energy drink, they have a lemonade, which is what I drink, they have power shots, caffeine shots there, and it's the good caffeine. It's the good caffeine they put in there. And they have power bars, they have Eagle Spirit water, it's an alkaline water you can get, the whole 9 yards. And so I made them the official drink of the Dan Clemens Show because, one, I use it on a daily basis, and two, full disclosure, I have stocks invested in them. Penny stocks, but they're still stocks nonetheless invested in them. Today's Bible reading comes from the epistle, Paul's epistle to the Philippians, chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, and having come in the likeness of men, and being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore God has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus Christ every knee should bow, and of those in heaven and those on earth and those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now, we talked about this a little bit the other day on the program, where there are a lot of Jews out there, and I was telling you I was watching a video with Ben Shapiro, and they asked him, what was his thoughts about Jesus Christ, if he thought Jesus Christ was the Messiah, and or what. And it was very telling what Ben Shapiro said on that video, and this is no dig at Ben Shapiro, but he fell into the fallacy of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin and the rulers of that day, and a lot of folks in Jerusalem that day, that they were looking for physical deliverance from their oppressors, and that would have been the Roman government. And nowhere, I've read through the Old Testament, and I still study in the Old Testament. Right now, my reading is I'm reading through the New Testament several times a year, and I'm taking blocks of the Old Testament and mixing it in with my New Testament reading. Nowhere in the Old Testament have I ever read that was the purpose of Jesus Christ coming to this earth, dying on the cross to deliver Israel from Roman captivity or Roman bondage. He was coming to deliver us from the bondage of sin and death. And so that's very telling. I like listening to things like that because it helps me to learn other people's perspectives and where their minds are at. His quote mail comes from an unknown author. Insomuch as anyone pushes you nearer to God, they are your truest friend. Remember that. Remember that, folks. Today's short Bible lesson comes from Apologetics Press by Caleb Cowley. He's a PhD over there. And it's a good article, a little bit long, but it's very good, very well written, and very well referenced. The eternality of God. How, in other words, how God is eternal. Really good lesson over there. And that's very important for us to understand as Christians, the eternal nature of God. All right, couple things to clear up here this morning. And this just, I've never got one of these before on Facebook. I posted on Facebook an article by Breitbart. New York Senator Schumer created diversity visas which invited alleged killer to New York. Now, technically, this guy I think was living down in Florida if everything's true about everything, and he came up to New York. But I went through this article and did some research on my own because I was like, 1990 back that far, yeah, and there's nothing factually wrong in this article, okay, as far as I'm concerned. Now, maybe I could be wrong and stand to be corrected, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to stand to be corrected by the AP, the Associated Press. Far too often I have found in the past, I've been doing this since end of 2007, far too often in the past I found the AP to put out false or fake news. They put out a narrative that is totally biased one way. They don't give all the facts. They don't tell the truth about the situation. They only put out the facts and truth that aligns up with their narrative. Many, many times over the years, and I pointed it out many, many times over the year. But this is what I got in Facebook here, real quick. A link you share contains info disputed by Associated Press, an independent fact checker for Facebook. First time I've ever got one of those. And I can't respond to it. I can't find out what's in error in it at all. I tried to go over to Associated Press and see if they actually put something up about this. Couldn't find anything on their site. And so I'm going to do some more research over the weekend here just to see, if I can find out. But if you're going to put that up, if Facebook is going to put that out, if they're going to do this and say that there's something in error or disputed info, we need to be able to respond to that. We need to be able to correct Facebook on this. We need to be able to correct AP on this. If we can find out what they say is disputed information, it's okay if, there's a lot of information people dispute out there, but, we need to, at some point, that information needs to quit being disputed and needs to be settled. Not based on someone's narrative or their bias or sound bites or talking points that they heard or because they live inside an echo chamber. It's because it's factual and it's true. So that's first. I was kind of surprised. I just got that this morning. I was really, really surprised that I got that fact check. Oh my goodness! And it just again, I just I couldn't believe it. And again, like I said, you can't respond to it. It's not like any other one. All I did was click on it, like someone else, to respond to it, and it just took me back to my article. Now I'm gonna, after the show, I'm gonna click on it again and go in there and put a message in, a comment in. Please tell me what is in dispute about the information in this article. Hopefully they get back to me. I don't know. I doubt it. I really doubt they're going to get back to me, and that's what frustrates me about Social Media Day. That's what really frustrates me about this. Okay, let me see here. Okay, I didn't get that over there. Let me see here. Democrats file further impeachment charges against Trump. This is by Ken Kuehl, Kewl, over at Breitbart, and this was posted up just yesterday. A group of Democrats is planning to file impeachment charges against President Donald Trump. The group's leader, Representative Luis Gutierrez, Democrat of Illinois, confirmed Wednesday. So it was 2 days ago. Well, this put it up yesterday. It is clear to us that he is unfit to be President of the United States of America, Gutierrez said Wednesday, although refused to state what the charges would be as well as the names Democrats would be supporting the effort. I assure you we will not leave you lacking for a reason, said Gutierrez, who has previously described Trump as having a white supremacist agenda and General John Kelly as a disgrace to his uniform. Yeah. You know, with all some of these disputes, I go back to my childhood, and if me and my brothers got into too bad of an argument, my dad would set us out in the yard and tell us to duke it out. You know, and I just, not that I don't want to see it, but I don't know if they would do it. I'd like to see if Gutierrez would go up to John Kelly and tell that to his face outside the White House out of uniform, that he's a disgrace to his uniform. See how far that actually gets him. One of the Democrats who has confirmed his involvement is Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat Tennessee, who previously opened impeachment proceedings over Trump's comments in response to the white nationals rally in Charlottesville in August, outside of which a woman was killed. And again, go back and read the words that he said. I told a lady in a comment on Facebook, one of these Indivisible common cause videos and everything, I said, do you read the words that are coming out of your keyboard? You know, we're talking about illegals and taxes, since we're talking about taxes. And she says, well, illegals pay taxes. You know, they pay billions of dollars a year in taxes. And I'm like, excuse me, how can an illegal person legally pay taxes? Do you see the conflict or the contradiction there? And that's what we were talking about the other day. This agree to disagree. There's a contradiction there. We can't agree to disagree on that point. Either they're legal and paying legal taxes or taxes legally, and one other person said, yeah, they're paying their Social Security that they'll never see. How can they be paying taxes or Social Security when they're illegal and cannot get the proper documents as I can? And I just put that point out there. I doubt I'm going to get an answer back, and if I do, it's probably going to be convoluted. But again, this is another thing that goes along with these impeachment. No high crimes or misdemeanors have been put forth. This idea that, oh, he's a white supremacist because of his comments about Charlottesville, they're only mad because he lumped Antifa and Black Lives Matter in with the white supremacist group as a hate group. That's what they're mad about. And because he did that, oh, he's in support of the white supremacist agenda. You got to be kidding me. I mean, honestly, folks, I'm really questioning the sanity of some of our elected officials. I think guys like Gutierrez and Cohen and some of these other guys that have brought forth these impeachment, you know, or try to bring forth these impeachment proceedings, have something mentally wrong with them. And maybe they're the ones that need to be investigated. You know, it just keeps going and going and going. It's like the Energizer Bunny. It never stops. I imagine, honestly, folks, if Trump goes to full 8 years, I think this is going to be full wall-to-wall, 24/7 Trump bashing. You know, clear to the end. If he goes to a full second term and isn't removed for any reasons like that and does a good job, it's going to be 24/7, 365 days a year Trump bashing, which is good for a guy like me. Even though I'm not a Trump supporter, there's a lot of misinformation that goes out in that Trump bashing that is fodder for a guy like me to sit here and commentate on. Okay, this one here, folks. I just back in July 26th, actually, there was a nurse out in Salt Lake City. The Utah nurse. This was an article over at arstechnia.com by David Kravitz. I wonder if he's any relation to the Kravitz on Bewitched. I'm not sure. You know, maybe someone can check that for me. Anyway, he writes in here, the Utah nurse who was roughed up and arrested on July 26th by Salt Lake City cop because she told the officer that he needed a warrant to draw blood from an unconscious patient has settled for a $500,000 payout. Body cam footage from the scene shows University Hospital nurse Alex Wibbles calmly telling the officer, who was trained for the task of blood withdrawal, that he cannot take a blood sample because the patient who was involved in a vehicle crash had neither been arrested nor gave consent. Then the cop lunges and grabs the nurse as she was fearfully backing away. He rushes her outside the hospital and handcuffs her, all the while she's screaming that there's no reason for her detainment. Somebody help. We're done, Salt Lake City Detective Jesse Paynes repeatedly says. What was told the news conference Tuesday that the footage which went viral made her case. We all deserve to know the truth, and the truth comes when you see the actual raw footage, and that's what happened in my case. No matter how truthful I was in telling my story, it was nothing compared to what the people saw as the visceral reaction people experienced when watching the footage of the experience that I went through. Charges were never filed against the nurse who was detained in a police vehicle for 20 minutes. Now, I reported the next day or the day after that there had been no charges filed, and she was actually released and went back to work. The $500,000 settlement is to be paid jointly by Salt Lake City and University Hospital. A hospital officer on the scene told the nurse that she would be obstructing justice if she interfered with Payne's investigation. Payne was fired from his post on October 10th, and another officer involved was demoted, according to Salt Lake Tribune. Both officers are challenging their punishment. The patient at the center of the dispute was a truck driver from Idaho named William Gray, who died last month. A man fleeing police crashed into the semi that Gray was driving on July 26, leaving him severely burned. The nurse said she would donate some of the money from the settlement to the Utah Nurses Association and would also financially back people in their bid to obtain body cam footage of police incidents. So here's what I see as a clear case of justice being dealt out. You know, the officer was fired and someone else was demoted. Hopefully they don't get their jobs back. You don't need police like that on the force. You just don't. They should always err on the side of caution. I think some police out there are just getting too aggressive. And that's part of the nature, part of what we're living in today. All right, now the story I said I was going to get to today that we had over from yesterday is it's a study out, and we've been talking a lot about free speech and on campuses and how it's being eroded. Okay, and this is by Rachel Fromer from over to freebeacon.com, posted on November 1st. A new study, and there's a link in there, folks, when you go there. And again, it's so easy for you to find out these stories. You don't have to look them up. Just go to danclemenshow.com and click on the show notes page and scroll down. You'll find these stories and more. There's a lot of stories each day I put in the show notes real quick here that I do not go over, but I think you might find interesting, and that's why I put them on my show notes page and put them over on the show. A new study examining the country's views on free speech found that 62% of students feel they are prevented from saying things they believe, and right-leaning views have taken the hardest hit. Emily Ekins, the director of polling at the Libertarian Cato Institute, who conducted the study, told the Washington Free Beacon that both Republican and Democrats reported it is their more conservative views they are wary of sharing, demonstrating that the left of center controls social power. Liberals reported feeling uncomfortable, saying they thought Confederate statues shouldn't be taken down, that supporting the First Amendment doesn't equal racism, and that identity politics has gone too far. Meanwhile, 50% of students say the dominant political view on campus is liberal. Only 20% believe their campus has a balanced mix of political perspectives. We don't see conservatives reporting they are uncomfortable expressing liberal views. It's the left of center that has the social power, said Ekins. The Cato study, titled The State of Free Speech and Tolerance in America, breaks down respondents' familiarly with social justice keywords, support for hate speech statutes, and views on disciplinary action for student protesters who disrupt speakers. Liberals were more ready than conservatives to support banning speakers and were less likely to advocate for any form of disciplinary action against students who disrupt a speaker, according to the study. 75% of Republicans want some form of punishment for disruptive students, while 64% Democrats prefer to see an administration listen to and address the students' demands. So do 56% of college students. Now let me stop the reading there. I was watching a video this morning. I don't know if I have to look up the link to it if I remember to put it in there. It was basically, I think it was UC Berkeley. So maybe you can go look it up. It was UC Berkeley, and they were getting ready to do some exams, and there was 3 or 4 students got up in the front and were protesting the taking of the exams right then. They wanted to be able to take them home with them, and just idiocy ensued. Idiocy really ensued. And one of them was even saying, we shouldn't have to take exams. Basically they just wanted their degree given to them without any measure of if they learned anything on their subject, whatever they were studying. And so on a lot of these college campuses, folks, the inmates are running the asylum, and idiocy ensues. Why aren't we seeing students disciplined for treading on free speech? Well, most college campuses are left of center, and people with those views told us they don't want to see the students disciplined, said Ekins. Ekins warned about the cost of such behavior. If universities give in and cancel any speaker who a substantial number of students find offensive, we will miss out on a wide number of public policy debates society needs to be having, said Ekins. Here, we want to have a conversation about police reform, but how are we supposed to do that if no one is allowed to speak about it? 61% of students think colleges owe to their students to expose them to all types of viewpoints, but 57% think colleges have an obligation to protect its students from offensive speech and ideas. A full 70% think it is morally unacceptable to say offensive things. Now, and this is where, and honestly, I don't care, but this is where I get in trouble with a lot of the social justice tyrants out there. Where I say, well, this is a very subjective term. What is offensive to you may not be offensive to me. And trust me when I tell you, my threshold for being offended is very, very high. It really is. So again, it's very subjective. What I don't find objectionable. Now, are there videos I watch that there's some objectionable speech or words in that? Yes, there is. Okay, but the ideas that are being put forth, even if they are objectionable to what I believe in, or they're 180 degrees out of what I believe in, how do I know what the other side thinks or what they support if I don't listen to them, if I don't expose myself to them? And you don't have to trust me. You can go through my show notes. Now, they're not every day, but I do look over Huffington Post and Slate and Salon and Vox and BuzzFeed, some of these more left of center, what people call left of center publications on the internet. And some of them, Slate actually, out of all those I just mentioned, Slate does a better job than most of them explaining both sides, believe it or not. But again, are we to base our morality on subjective things? Thou shalt not kill. That's not subjective. That says thou shalt not kill, and actually the more proper translation there is thou shalt not murder. Premeditatively take a life. That's not subjective. That is a very objective moral standard. So 70% think it is morally unacceptable to say offensive things. And again, if I'm giving you, we're going to get into the taxes here. Let's say I support the GOP tax plan. I don't support everything in it. There's some things in it I wish they'd just quit subsidizing, like homeowners over renters, with the homeowners deduction. Because frankly, I went back and looked at mine over the years with what I pay in my mortgage and stuff like that, and it's not that much. It's not that much of a savings. If it went away, it really wouldn't bother us, too much here. And besides, and we'll get into it, the GOP and President Trump, I think, have taken care of and addressed that subject. But let me read up. This is very, very important. Let me finish reading up this article. Though 85% of students recognize it would be difficult to ban hate speech, again, another subjective term, what is hate to somebody isn't hate to me, okay? 62% still think society can somehow impose such a prohibition while maintaining free speech. Can't be done. I'm going to stop the reading there, folks. I'm telling you right now, it cannot be done. You cannot impose your moralities on free speech because you are offended or it hurts your little feelings or whatever, drives you into a safe space because you think it's offensive and you want prohibitions against it. It's not going to happen, because once you start going down, and that's more than a slippery slope, folks. When you start regulating free speech that way, you just jumped off a cliff with no hope of restraining yourself before you hit that sudden stop at the bottom. You're going to destroy the First Amendment. You start doing stuff like that. And quite frankly, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they start trying to regulate free speech like that, it's going to be a free-for-all in the courts to get the Supreme Court to reject these type of things. Because again, they're very, very subjective. And honestly, I don't want it left up to the courts to say what is or is not free speech. I think that should be up to the American people. And I think freedom of speech should be given the widest latitude as possible. If not, then it's not free speech. People are not terribly consistent in principled defense of speech. They are sure we can protect the First Amendment and curb hate speech, says Ekins. This is across political lines. Each side has their issue that they want to see people punished for. And that's exactly what she hits it right on the head there. She hits it right on the head here. Rachel just boils it right down here. That they have these things across political lines that they want to see someone on the other side punished for. And again, that's why I went to this freedom and liberty and anti-freedom, anti-liberty paradigm instead of left, right, conservative, liberal, because there's conservatives out there that are just as anti-freedom on some subjects as anybody else out there. Case in point, 54% of Republicans want to fire business executives who burn flags on weekends. 82% of Democrats respond that saying illegal immigrants should be deported is hateful or offensive. Those two things right there. I'm a veteran. And I'm proud to be a veteran. I'm glad I was able to serve my country in some small way that way. Serving in our armed forces. Some people disagree with that, but I'm not here to dispute that. And I do honor the flag. And I honor what it represents. The Pledge of Allegiance, I honor what it represents. But someone burning the flag is part of freedom of speech. People want to put laws on burning the flag. I mean, that's you can, but those are going to be challenged, and there's going to be a lot of butt burn going on out there because of these challenges. And again, I think it is part of freedom of speech. Do I like it? No. Do I think it's detestable? Yes. Will I protect someone's right to do it? Yes. Yes, I will. And the same way with the immigrants. I've been called a racist for a long time about my stance. Back in 2007, I've been voicing my stance on immigration, and I've been called all sorts of things. And it's what I'm saying is hateful and offensive. Oh, so me wanting people to obey the law and come here legally is hateful and offensive. Okay, I don't get it, and you can't support that stance, and I'm not going to agree to disagree with you. What I'm going to do is put the burden of proof back on you and say, prove it. That way you don't ever get Kafka trapped into something. If you get accusations thrown at you, make them prove it. Don't respond to it. Don't do anything else. But sit there and make them prove it. 9 times out of 10, especially on these keyboard warriors out there on the internet, they will not do it. All right. Meanwhile, college students voiced broad support for passing laws making it illegal to say offensive things about Jews, immigrants, LGBT individuals. Akins attributes support for hate speech statutes among students in part to immaturity and lack of world experience, but said a more troubling fact may be at play. What happens when you are 18 to 26 really sticks with you. Older liberals who were students in the 1960s grew up in a time when the censors who were on the right, so for them the First Amendment meant and continues to mean freedom, the civil rights movement, said Ekins, but a lot of younger students associate the First Amendment with Trump and Milo Yiannopoulos, who mock transgender people. And honestly, I think Milo Yiannopoulos, yeah. Trump mocking transgender people. Here again, I think we got an issue here where he's guilty by association, and it's a reverse association. He's not associating with them; they're associating with him. When Milo calls him, Big Daddy or something like that. Anyway, I'll finish up last couple paragraphs. Today's students aren't seeing the First Amendment as a tool to overcome oppression, and that won't change, said Ekins. Cato conducted its survey with the help of YouGov, which collected responses August 15th to the 23rd from 2,547 Americans 18 years old and older, with a final representation data set at 2,300 folks. So we see here on college campuses, and this is where we really got to grab them, and I do not, repeat, I do not let these folks get away with this. I just won't. I will not let them I will not let people in my boat. I will not let them that are in a moat get away with their arcane, inaccurate, inflammatory ideas about the First Amendment and what speech is offensive and what isn't offensive. I'm just not going to do it. And I've been called a lot of things that I can't even share with you on Facebook because of this. And it's not like I'm standing there calling them all sorts of names, you dirty, rotten so's and so's. If you don't believe this way, then, I could go hellfire and brimstone on them if I wanted to, but I don't do that. I put out the facts and the truth and saying, you can't prove that what I'm saying is hate speech. Now, you may think it's hateful because you would never say, I think it's hateful if I said that. And that's on you. That's on you. But if somebody else says something you think is hateful, doesn't necessarily mean it's hateful, because, again, you cannot prove that it's hateful. Sorry. You don't get to be the arbiter without a debate, without a discussion between two people, what is or is not hate speech or offensive speech or whatever. And if there isn't a conversation about it, again, who died left you, boss, if we can't sit there and discuss this. All right. Now the big story of the day. This is from the Daily Signal. I got to wet my whistle here a little bit. Oh, coffee's really good this morning, folks. Again, it's half-calf coffee. I tried the decaf and it just wasn't working, and I can't handle the full anymore. So I went half-calf, and it seems to be a good medium for me anyway. Okay, GOP tax plan would revitalize the U.S. economy, give significant tax relief. This is over from the Daily Signal, and this has so many authors on it. Let me get through these. Romina Boca, Rachel Gressler, Adam Michael, Lindsay Burke, David Burton, Nicholas Loris, Katie Tubb. These were all people that helped with this, because there's a lot of things that had to gather together here. We're not going to be able to read the whole thing. I got other articles that actually break down a few more things with this in this article here. House Republicans unveiled their plan to update the nation's tax code on Thursday. If they're successful at passing the plan known as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it will mark the first time in more than 3 decades that Americans will have a chance to experience the benefits of comprehensive pro-growth tax reform. Tax reform should provide relief to all Americans and ultimately help the economy break out of its stagnant economic growth. To achieve this, tax reform should simplify the current tax code, lower tax rates on individuals and businesses, and update the business tax system to make the U.S. competitive and remove barriers to investment and job creation. The plan that does this has the potential to unleash higher wages, create more jobs, spread untold opportunity through a larger and more dynamic economy. Americans need an alternative. I keep reading now. I wish they'd quit putting that in there. Okay, that's my fist. My fist of fury in there. The GOP tax plan scores well on all these fronts. And I trust people over Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Daily Signal, on some of these over at fee.org, Mises, Cato Institute. Now, the more Austrian economist, and I agree with them on this, that there's some things in here like some of the deductions that they still have in there for families and homeowners and stuff like that. They need to get away, before I read into this, they need to do away with all the deductions. They need to go the lowest taxes that we possibly can, which I've always said a flat tax of 10%, and you don't tax the first, single, and they got that right. $12,000 for singles and $24,000 for married couples. You don't tax. That's a zero tax bracket, which is actually another tax bracket that people, especially in the mainstream media, do not report on. So I don't think it goes far enough, but it's a step in the right direction. So I'm okay with that. Let's not baby steps, but let's keep going in the right direction here, especially when it comes to the estate tax. Not that I have to worry about that, but I know a lot of people that have small businesses that are worth quite a bit of money. We're talking up in the millions of dollars, and if it has to be inherited by somebody else, I don't see why the government gets to take another bite at the apple, because they've already paid taxes on this stuff throughout their careers and their life, okay? I got to turn this chair just a hair bit. That's more comfortable. All right, some key takeaways. One, simplification. And I'm all for simplification. I wish we would get it down to where, like I said, we had just one tax bracket and we could file our taxes on a postcard. To say we're breathing and this is what we made. These are taxes that were withheld, and, make sure that, everything's hunky-dory, right? And so and I know that would decimate an industry, but I'm sure there's other things they can do as accountants and tax preparers and stuff. Matter of fact, they can come on YouTube and start up a show like I did. Just kidding, folks. Lower rates. The proposed plan would drastically lower tax rates for corporations, small businesses, and lower to moderate income individuals and families. Now, the one thing this would do, as I was digging through this, and I think it's lower in the article here, and we'll get to it, but it's going to eliminate a lot of the deductions, like the child tax credit and stuff like that. And a lot of these deductions were actually giving people money through the tax code, through the IRS, who didn't make any money to begin with, didn't pay taxes to begin with because of their income levels or whatever. Okay. Let's see, the new 20% corporate tax rate would help make the U.S. competitive with the rest of the world, and the top 25% small business or pass-through tax rate would go a long way towards stimulating entrepreneurship, job creation, and income growth across all income groups in America. And we talked about that pass-through, tax rate, for single, partnerships or entrepreneurs, individual corporations, stuff like that. Business taxes. Excuse me. I want to read this one other paragraph here. By maintaining the top marginal tax rate on individuals, however, the plan would fail to achieve optimal economic growth, as it leaves a significant portion of economic activity subject to the 39.6% federal tax rate. And hopefully they can talk about this and get that stupid thing knocked down. That is ridiculous, folks. Again, I was watching a video the other day, and you go back from the Depression on up to today, and historically the government has only ever collected 17% of GDP. That's it. No matter if they had real high rates or real low rates, it's 17%. So even then, I would be happy, even if we just made it 17% for everybody. Business tax, individuals, the whole 9 yards. But I digress. Business taxes. The combination of business tax reforms, including the top 20% corporate tax rate, 5 years worth of full expensing, and a modernized international tax system would provide a huge boost to the U.S. economy and its workers. Now here's some of the details. Lower and simplified bottom rates, but keep the top marginal rate, which I don't agree with. If you're going to cut taxes, cut them for everybody. And this, again, this is probably going to be the only way they're going to get this passed if they keep that top marginal rate. I don't agree with it, but like I said, it's a step in the right direction. This is probably just an appeasement for the anti-freedom folks in Congress. So they go down. They talk about different rates ranging from 10 to 39.6%. To 4, and that was different ranges before. Now it's 12%, 25%, 35%, and 39.6%. Most low to middle income earners would face lower marginal tax rates, which would help encourage more work and also put more money back in the taxpayer pockets to spend more productively than the federal government. Unfortunately, the plan maintains the top marginal rate of 39.6%, which reaches 43.4% when factoring in Obamacare surtax. With only one of every 150 taxpayers actually paying the top rate, more than one of every $5 of taxable income is subject to that tax rate. That means a lot of economic activity is affected by the top rate, and lowering it would have a significant and positive impact on investment, productivity, incomes, job growth in the USA. And this was proved, no matter what the anti-freedom folks out there say, the 1983 Reagan tax cuts, they were proven correct. They launched an economic boom that lasted clear up to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a beneficiary of the Reagan economics, but they don't want to admit that. Again, as I talked on the show this past week, yesterday I guess it was, socialists don't like history because history proves them wrong. And B.B. Reich, he's just as much a socialist or fascist as anybody else out there. And I'm not saying a Nazi fascist. I'm just saying economically and governmentally a fascist. And he doesn't like the history. As a matter of fact, he actually distorts history and rewrites history. So anyway, new income brackets, lower marginal rates for many. Let's see here. There are just a lot of numbers that go into that. There were some other things down here. I didn't want to get too far out in the weeds because it's hard for people to follow that. This is one I want to get to. Double standard deduction would simplify taxes for tens of millions. The GOP plan roughly doubles the standard deductions from $6,350 to $12,000 for individuals, and from $12,700 to $24,000 for married couples. This would go a long way towards helping Americans keep more of their hard-earned dollars. Doubling the standard deduction would also vastly simplify tax filing for tens of millions of Americans who would no longer need to itemize their deductions. This would make tax filing easier and would make postcard-sized tax returns a reality for certain taxpayers. We estimate that doubling the standard deduction would roughly cut the percentage of taxpayers who itemize their deductions in half, from 30% to 15.5%, saving about 22 million taxpayers from the headaches of keeping track of all their itemized deductions. When combined with the plan's elimination of state and local income and sales tax, the percentage of taxpayers who itemize their deductions would drop even further. State and local deductions partially eliminated. The proposed tax plan would partially eliminate state and local tax deductions by getting rid of the deduction for income or state tax, and by capping the deduction for property taxes at $10,000. State and local tax deductions provide no economic benefit. In fact, they are outright detrimental to the economy. By allowing those who itemize their taxes to deduct property taxes as well as income or sales tax they pay the state and local governments, these deductions shift the burden of high tax states onto low tax states and spread the portion of high income earners' taxes onto lower and middle earner tax bills. Like I said, what they're doing is they're spreading the pain with all these deductions. They're spreading the pain throughout the country instead of in certain regions. And if it stayed in those regions, then maybe those regions of states or whatever would be forced to deal with that. Okay? For example, just 7 states, California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, and Connecticut, receive more than 50% of the value of the state and local tax deductions. And they're some of the most highly taxed states in the country. On net, the average millionaire receives 102 times as much benefit from the state and local deduction as a typical household that makes between $75,000 and $100,000. Eliminating the sales and income tax deductions would be a huge benefit to at least 85% of Americans. Currently, 70% of taxpayers do not itemize their deductions and therefore receive no benefit from the state and local tax deductions. We estimate that doubling the standard deduction as proposed in the tax plan would reduce the percentage of taxpayers that itemize to just over 15%. Eliminating deductions would also provide a huge boost in federal tax revenues to help accommodate the plan's lower marginal tax rates, which benefit all taxpayers, even those who lose their state and local income and sales tax deductions. Maintaining the property tax deduction could have unintended consequences that would adversely impact lower middle income families. That's because eliminating the income and sales tax deductions but keeping the property tax deduction would encourage states to concentrate their tax burden on property taxes, which would make home ownership less affordable, particularly for low and middle income families. The plan's $10,000 cap on property tax deductions would help limit the subsidy to very wealthy homeowners in high tax states, but the cap should be even lower if the goal is to maintain the deduction primarily for middle and middle class families. According to IRS data, the only taxpayers who would be affected by the cap are those who make well over $1 million a year. Eliminating the personal exemptions, increasing child tax credit would better target families. Now, this is something I'm still fuzzy on. I'm not really sure about all the ins and outs of the child's tax credit because we never qualified for it. As a general principle, Congress should refrain from implementing social policy through the tax code, but if lawmakers do want to provide child relief financial assistance to households through the tax code, the child tax credit is a more efficient way to give targeted relief rather than the personal exemption. The proposed tax plan would eliminate the existing $3,400 personal exemption, would combine the new double-sized standard deduction and $600 increase to the child tax credit from $100 to $1,600. Virtually all taxpayers, including families with children, would face lower tax bills, even excluding the current proposed exemption. But as mentioned, the personal exemption is not the most efficient way to provide relief to taxpayers based on their family size, as the progressive nature of the tax codes means that wealthier families receive more value per person from the exemption than lower and middle income families. The child tax credit is a better way to provide child-related financial relief to families who need it most. Unlike the personal exemption, the value of the child tax credit is not smaller for low-income families. In fact, it is lower and even non-existent for upper-income families, as the credit phases out rather quickly between income levels of $110,000 and $160,000 a year. So while the enhanced child tax credit would not contribute much to economic growth, it would help provide additional tax relief to low and middle income families with children. Cutting corporate tax rate would raise workers' wages. And this one here is the biggest bone of contention with B.B. Reich, Indivisible Group, and Common Cause, some of these other groups out there that say that this is just a tax scam going on. Because in their mind, because they don't understand competition, they don't understand capitalism, they don't understand free markets and how they work, especially that little word I slipped in there about competition. They think, and I'm going to tell you what they think before we get into this, they think if corporations have more money, they're going to give bigger golden parachutes to their CEOs, their upper management, and board members, and the heck with the workers. And some companies might do that. Some big corporations might do that. But let me tell you this. How are they going to compete against other corporations if these other corporations decide to keep all the benefits for upper management and board members the same and actually use that money to expand productions, hire more workers, and offer higher wages and benefits for the workers to be more competitive against somebody else? See, that's what you'll never hear them talk about that. I shared a video months ago about this where I went through a B.B. Reich video and just hammered every point he put out there and just told you what he was leaving out. And, I had references and everything in that video. But you can, again, they only tell you part of the story, only what makes their side look good. All right? So cutting corporate tax rates would raise workers' wages, permanently lowering the corporate tax rate to 20% in the single most important pro-growth change included in the Tax Cuts and Job Acts. U.S. businesses currently face the highest statutory corporate tax rate in the developed world. The United States ranks consistently as one of the worst in business tax environments in the world. Over the past few decades, countries around the world have steadily lowered their corporate tax rates, leaving American businesses behind. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act takes a bold step to move U.S. corporate tax rate into line with around the world. The plan calls for a permanent 20% corporate tax rate, down from the current federal rate of 35%. A 20% corporate tax rate would encourage significant new investment in the U.S., which would primarily benefit workers through higher wages and more jobs. The permanence of the U.S. tax cut is especially important. A temporary rate cut would have left significant potential economic growth on the table. A permanent tax cut, as proposed Thursday, would drive growth in business investment, would lead to greater worker productivity, more hiring, significant wage increase. And let me stop reading there. Like I said, this is where the anti-freedom folks, their arguments fall down, because the corporations just don't do that. Quite honestly, if you look at, now they're only using the U3, but the unemployment's down just a little over 4%, which if it gets below 4%, some economists, and I don't agree with them, but some economists say we're in full employment. And the stock market's hit new records every day, and most analysts are saying this is not a bubble. It's not going to be corrected. This is because businesses are expanding. They're enthusiastic about the economic situation in the future of America, and they're acting like that. And see, this is where the anti-freedom folks actually fall down in this argument. Oh, they're not going to give it to the workers, so the workers are going to get hosed again. And that's just not the case. My buddy Dave was saying, he works for a corporation, and they want to take care of their workers. And I've worked for enough of them over the past years that they struggle to give any type of raises to anybody, because of the economic structures that the government has imposed on the economy. So when you hear somebody, question them on this. Ask them for proof. Why they're against this. Why they think that corporations don't spend money on their workers and stuff like that. Because there's competition. I slipped that word in there, competition. If they don't take care of their workers better, there's more. If your company makes widget A, there might be 3 or 4 other corporations out there that make a widget A too. And so people can go between these companies and find out which the best place is for, worker atmosphere, wages, benefits, all that kind of stuff. And corporations know this. These guys like B.B. Rice think these corporations work in a vacuum. They know what competition is, and they know that, they can spread the wealth around, but they need to make sure they take care of the workers. They need to make sure they take care of the workers so they can have the best workers. They're able to have an abundance of workers to choose from, so they can try to weed out the bad ones. And, they're going to have that ability if they're offering higher benefits and wages. Again, to me, that's such a simple idea. It's like falling off the log simple. But you'll hear a lot of anti-freedom folks out there tell you that that's just not going to be the case. 5-year expensing. The most pro-growth component of tax reform is permanent and full immediate expensing of all business costs. This provision alone could allow the economy to grow 5% larger and create 1 million jobs over the next decade, or sooner, in my opinion. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would improve the status quo by allowing 5 years of expensing. The proposal leaves some growth on the sidewalk by pursuing expensing as a temporary policy and limiting it to property and new equipment. Expensing allows companies to deduct the cost of investments immediately, such as the cost of new farm equipment or new factory equipment. Expensing lowers the tax rate on such new investments, allowing businesses to expand their U.S. investments, creating jobs in the U.S., and ultimately leading to higher wages and lower economy. A similar version of the expensing provision proposed in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as scored by the Tax Foundation, would grow the economy by 0.18% over 10 years. This stands in stark contrast with the 5% growth the economy could experience if expensing were applied more broadly and made permanent. So, lower rates on pass-through businesses. Most businesses, including the vast majority of small businesses, are taxed as S corporations or partnerships. Rather than pay taxes at the business level, the income they earn is passed through to the individual owners who pay taxes on their individual tax returns. pass-through business accounts for about 2/5 of payroll. The GOP tax proposal would reduce the rate of these businesses' pay to 25% from as high as 40%. This aspect of the proposal will help small firms grow and have a positive impact on job creation and job or wage growth. The proposal also contains rules to prevent higher income salaries from being recharacterized as pass-through income, although such rules are needed if pass-through income is to be taxed at a lower rate than high salary income. They introduce substantial complexity to law. There's no simple way to address the problem in a fair and economically conservative manner. The GOP tax bill would do the following. Investors who do not work for the business get the 25% rate. For those that work for the business, there are rules determining how much salary subject to higher rates and how much is pass-through or capital income subject to the lower rate. These rules are as follows. In general, 70% is treated as salary and 30% is pass-through or capital income. Taxpayers can elect to use the alternative facts and circumstances test, which would determine the capital income by looking at the investment in the company and multiplying that by some of the federal short-term rate plus 7%, i.e. about 8%. There are, in addition, rules, and it goes on down. They talk about all these rules. You can go read this through there. Repeals the estate tax after 2023. I don't understand why that cannot. Well, I do understand because I did some reading, but at first when I heard this, I'm like, man, they just ought to do that automatically. But the problem is a lot of states have already been planned out, and to do it automatically here, that would be a huge burden on folks to try to get that. Although I think a lot of people with the right type of properties would gladly go through that burden if they just dropped it off tomorrow. Repeals the estate tax or the death tax, inheritance tax. It's all those the same. The Tax Cut and Job Act would repeal the estate tax along with generation skipping taxes after 5 years and would immediately double the value of the basic exclusion from the current level of $5.45 million. The plan would not repeal the related gift tax, but would lower the top rate to 35% and index the annual and lifetime exclusions to inflation. Here's another one here. Repeals the alternative minimum tax. The Tax Cuts and Job Act eliminates the alternative minimum tax in both the corporate and individual tax codes. Repeal this tax is a tremendous simplification of the tax codes for millions of individuals and businesses. The alternative minimum tax generally applies to alternative tax rate to a more broadly defined measure of income and allows a narrower set of deductions with the intentions of increasing the tax liability for those firms and individuals who can uniquely lower their effective tax rate by taking advantage of the normal tax system. The alternative minimum tax, however, does this intended job poorly and inefficiently by burdening taxpayers with additional paperwork, requiring millions of Americans and businesses to calculate their taxes twice. While this can be difficult in the past to fully eliminate the alternative minimum tax because of the revenue it generates, the Tax Cut and Jobs changes to the tax rates and brackets along with the elimination. Let families save for pre-K through private K through 12 education expenses and advances school choice. There's going to be some more deductions in there about that. There's a lot of numbers in there. Moving closer to a free market energy policy. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act makes a profound policy statement that is to be commended. The goal of the bill's energy measure is to move closer to a free market energy agenda. Free market supply affordable energy, innovation, and a clean environment better than any heavy-handed regulatory approach to manipulate how people produce and use energy. In getting to the goal, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act will repeal and sunset targeted tax credits for specific energy sources, technologies, and extraction methods. Regrettably, though, the bill extends and phases out several energy tax credits that expired in 2016-2017. Eliminating the preferential treatment in the tax code would drive energy innovation, competition, job creation, resulting in healthier, robust energy sector that's independent of Washington. We're going to get into another article here quick on this. Cutting oil and natural gas subsidies, and this is good. We need to cut these subsidies for these corporations. This is corporate welfare, folks. One of the things, and I haven't seen in here yet, that really needs to be tackled are the sugar subsidies. Those are draconian. They're not needed. And it's only benefits a handful of taxpayers in the country. Anyway, cutting oil and natural gas subsidies. Proponents of renewable subsidies often argue that oil companies receive subsidies, so wind and solar should get them too. Yet the left often overstates its case on what truly counts as a subsidy for oil, broadly available tax credits, and ignores the fact that the government does far more to harm natural resource development than help it. So they're going to be cutting those type of energy subsidies, green energy subsidies. I got an article. We're going to talk about that just real quick. Nuclear tax credits. That's in there, and is it a perfect bill? No, it's not a perfect bill, but is it a step in the right direction? It absolutely is. The Daily Caller is talking about a GOP tax plan eliminates green subsidies. This is by Michael Bastish. The GOP's plan to overhaul the U.S. tax code includes changes to green energy tax subsidies that lawmakers say will save taxpayers billions of dollars every year. The only thing it's going to really do here once we get rid of these subsidies, it's going to eliminate some of the Democrats' fundraising abilities and paybacks to their bundlers and stuff like that. Like Solyndra, okay? The owner of Solyndra got like $500 million. It was a lot of money. A lot of scratch, and come to find out they were a bundler for the Clintons and for the DNC. So they're going to tackle this. They're getting rid of the green subsidies, as it were. NFL. We talked about this. I got a video about this, about how the NFL is paid by the Department of Defense. All these we're talking millions and millions of dollars of taxes every year. For these patriotic military displays at their games. And from bluntforcetruth.com, NFL loses big tax subsidy in the GOP plan. It looks like Congress is taking steps to end some of the special tax breaks and subsidies for major sports leagues in its tax reform package. Professional sports leagues like the NFL enjoyed tax exemptions on the municipal bonds that are used to build their stadiums. A provision in Section 3604 eliminates this perk. If sports teams want to build new stadiums, they're going to pay the federal taxes to do it. These municipal bonds exemptions aren't the only tax breaks carved out for the NFL in the current tax code. On Wednesday, CRTV White House correspondent John Miller highlighted the special tax breaks the NFL receives and pointed out how they shouldn't be getting them if some players want to disrespect the national anthem and flag. That's not a good reason for stopping it, but that the national anthem protest has actually brought this information out that a lot of Americans did not know. Part of this, from other sources I've been reading, they're not only going to get rid of the bond things, they're going to stop the DOJ from giving millions and millions of dollars to the NFL to do these things. So, and then finally, sort of wrapping up all of our tax things, and not finally wrapping it up, but we have a couple other things I want to get to, but there's an article by Vox that I definitely want to get to here real quick. I gotta do this up real quick, get you back over here. But there's one more thing, and it has to do with deregulation, and a lot of this deregulation that's going to be going on is actually with the tax code. It's actually going on because of the tax code. So I think it's a great thing. Now, we have this article here from FEE.org by Brittany Hunter. Trump is quietly deregulating all things. Because of all the hoopla, because of all the lamestream media trying to foment hate and discontent and everything in the country, thank God they're missing some of the better stuff that President Trump is doing. More people alive in America today have probably never had the experience of sending a telegram. There are a host of reasons for this, the main one being that the telegram stopped being fashionable decades ago as burgeoning technology replaced its use in the modern world. The very last Western Union telegram was sent 11 years ago. Over a decade too late, the FCC has finally decided to end burdensome regulations that stifled telegraph technology, as Reuters reported. AT&T, originally known as the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, in 2013 lamented the FCC's failure to formally stop enforcing some telegraph rules. Regulations have a tendency to persist long after they outlived any usefulness, and it takes real focus and effort to ultimately remove them from the books, even when everybody agrees that it is a common sense thing to do, the company said. Now let me stop the reading there. The reason why a lot of these regulations are hard to get rid of is because when Congress set these things up, these bureaucracies, they should have put, and they can still go back and do this. And I've encouraged my congressmen to think about this and push for it. Lou Barletta and some other ones I've talked to in the past. They need to put a sunset. What they need to do is these regulations and bureaucracies need to be reauthorized every 5 or 10 years. I'd say 5 years. Some people said that might be too much of a burden, but I'm thinking, what else does a bureaucrat have to do? Most of the time, I'm serious. I think most of the time, bureaucrats put out new regulations just to justify their jobs. Okay, but Congress should come back in, all these bureaucracies, and say, look, all your regulations are going to be sunsetted and have to be reapproved every 5 years. And if this happened, then you wouldn't have this situation like AT&T is facing here. Regulations are far easier to create than they are to dismantle, as Milton Friedman said. Nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program. Yet lately there has been an undeniable trend of repealing these types of regulations, the likes of which America hasn't seen since the Reagan administration. And in the spirit of giving credit where credit is due, this current regulatory rollback is due largely to President Donald Trump. Regulations are far easier to create than they are to dismantle. Ronald Reagan left many legacies during his duration in the White House, and while many were less than praiseworthy, the war on drugs springs to mind, he did accomplish some deregulation. In fact, during the Reagan presidency, both the Federal Register and federal regulations decreased by more than 1/3, and as impressive as this record surely was, it's already been broken by Donald Trump. Upon taking office, Trump signed an executive order telling federal agencies that they must cut 2 existing regulations for each new regulation proposed. Contained within the executive order was the demand that each federal agency create a task force with the explicit purpose of finding regulations worth slashing. This act was intended to help the newly sworn-in president reach his promise of cutting 70% of the federal regulations. While the talk of regulatory cuts is typical red meat rhetoric, the left was obviously less than pleased with this executive order. A coalition of left-leaning organizations even joined together in February and sued Trump on the grounds that his executive order would potentially block or force the repeal of regulations needed to protect health, safety, and the environment across a broad range of topics, from automobile safety to occupational health to air pollution to endangered species. But the lawsuit did not scare Trump away from his objective. When Obama had been in office as long as Trump currently has, regulations were 28% higher. But since taking office, Trump has repealed hundreds of these regulations. When Obama had been in office, I don't know why they, I don't know why this is in there twice. Anyway, and when it comes to regulations in general, the score speaks for itself. During the same period of time of their respective presidencies, Obama's regulatory tally was at 1,737, while Trump's is at 1,241. And while Reagan's own regulatory cuts were admirable, they still don't compare with Trump if you judge them by the same time frame. Earlier this October, Trump announced his plan to further cut taxes along with red tape that negatively impact both businesses and consumers. According to CEI, the current level of federal regulatory burdens has amounted to nearly $2 trillion. And while business owners may pay the initial cost, it is inevitably trickled down to the consumer. And I've been telling you guys this for years, folks, but a lot of liberals don't listen to me on this. When overhead costs are raised on entrepreneurs, that cost must be made up for somewhere or from somewhere. And as CEI also estimates, these hidden costs can amount to about $15,000 per household in any given year. So again, he's cutting a lot of, and I'm glad to do, but a lot of the anti-freedom folks forgot he signed this executive order. I haven't forgot about this. With this tax reform, he's going to be even deregulating the IRS, which is part of the federal government. He's going to be deregulating that more. And he's well on his way to doing that. This all has to do with economic liberty, folks. If their federal regulatory burdens have amounted to nearly $2 trillion a year on businesses, that $2 trillion, folks, is a lot of scratch. I don't care who you are. $2 trillion is a lot of scratch. And if government can cut these burdens, and another one, it's better for everybody. And the one that really boggles my mind is the one about the internet. All this net neutrality. We got to have the government come in here and regulate all this, right? And I've given example after example after example of foreign countries like China, like Russia, Germany, some of these other countries that are cracking down on free speech through the internet. Because they have net neutrality. They want to make everything fair. And they want to bring that here to the United States. And they think I'm wrong for thinking this. And again, I like competition. I like free markets. At one of the biggest corporations in the history of the country before the antitrust laws came in under Theodore Roosevelt was Standard Oil. And they had somewhere, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was somewhere close to 90 to 92% of the market share. They're a monopoly. And me and my son Kyle had this discussion quite a bit. He said, well, they might as well be a monopoly. And I said, well, then you have to redefine what a monopoly is. Monopoly is 100% control of a sector of a market. I said, they only had 90 to 92%. When they started talking about antitrust bills, do you know how much they had? And I think this is rough figures. I may be wrong on this, and I can stand to be corrected. But when they actually passed the antitrust bills and started hammering more on Standard Oil, they had went from 92% to somewhere down around 75 to 72% of market share. Well, what changed? Nothing. Nothing changed but competition. There was still, let's say they were at 92%. Let's just say for rough figures. There was still 8% of the market out there, folks, that owned other oil and other oil interests. And what they were doing, those smaller companies tend to be more innovative and more competitive and quicker to change than a big corporation like Standard Oil. And that's how they got the market. And now today, Standard Oil, I mean, I know they've gone through, other, they've been merged with other companies, stuff like that. But if everything was left the way it was and there was no mergers, I think Standard Oil would be down there about the 8% of the market with all a bunch of other players being in there and no one having a majority share of the market. See that? So if there's $2 trillion being spent in regulatory burdens, wouldn't that be better spent if it was spent on, the workers? Workers' wages and benefits and working conditions. Wouldn't that be better? No. Got to give it to the, we got to have all these regulations so all this money is being spent. A lot of this is on fees and paperwork and stuff to meet these regulatory and lawyers and everything else to make sure that they're living up to these regulations. Doesn't go into production, doesn't do anything for the business's bottom line whatsoever. It's just wasted money. So, like I said, all these other stuff going on, this is quietly going on in the background, and they're not even realizing how much President Trump is deregulating the government. It's fantastic. I'm happy. I'm giving him an attaboy. Now, this is some other small stories coming up here real quick. I got about 5 minutes. I just want to get into this one. Blunt Force Truth is reporting that there was a Twitter employee shuts down President Trump's account. An employee at the left-leaning social media giant Twitter deactivated President Trump's Twitter account on Thursday, sparking widespread outrage across the platform. Twitter's initial statement regarding the incident claimed that the Trump account was inadvertently deactivated due to a human error by a Twitter employee. However, after further investigation, Twitter revealed that the act appeared to be not inadvertent but intentional, carried out by an employee on their last day of work. The revelation immediately sparked harsh criticism at the social media platform, which has long been accused of bias against conservatives. Political analyst Nick Short, who serves as the digital media director of the Security Studies Group, highlighted key concerns about that the incident actually raised. Do this customer service support employee also mess with Trump's Twitter account? Did he steal any private info as well? Short tweeted. In another tweet, Short pointed out how this is most likely a reflection on the culture at Twitter. Think about this next time you contact Twitter customer support. Guaranteed, this employee and fellow co-workers all share the same ideology, Short wrote. And this is this Gab I've been telling you about. You see it in my real quick here in my social medias area here. If you look up here, I guess you can't. You won't be able to see the arrow. Up in the upper right-hand corner is the Gab icon, and then over in the upper left corner is Minds.com, and it says here that Gab, the new social media platform that bills itself as free speech platform, hammered Twitter. This all comes just one day after Twitter General Counsel Sean Eggett revealed to the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday that the company had censored tweets that were damaging to the Democratic Party during the 2016 election. And we knew about this stuff. This stuff is old news. And it goes on, so I encourage you to go read that article over there. And real quick here, this is the last one we'll get into real quick. Vox. No, Vox. Small government does not mean white nationalism. According to a recent article in Vox, conservatives who denounce government overreach aren't really concerned about burdensome regulations. No, it turns out the language of small government is really just a handmaiden to ethno-nationalism. What? Proof, the author David Roberts points to the 2016 New York Times story that depicted a few white men in rural America venting their anger over regulations against coal rolling, a practice of modifying diesel truck engines to spew thick black smoke. Apparently, being a blue-collar white man who likes spewing black smoke in the air makes you a white nationalist. And apparently, spewing black smoke into the air is the essence of liberty and limited government. Roberts is both misguided and self-deluded as he conveniently overlooks a few important factors. Most importantly, or worseningly, he ignores the fact that bureaucratic red tape and regulations are a burden to everyone, regardless of race, and they impose particularly heavy cost on poor people and minorities. And so I'm going to leave it there. And he goes on to say why limited government matters. And folks, that's a good thing to leave the show on. Why does limited government matter? And I was talking to Dave in some tweets this morning. You know, I do not live a bourgeois lifestyle here. But to Marxists and to socialists, that doesn't matter because of my ideas. Because I don't think it's right for us to penalize or to condemn or to threaten people who are financially successful. And according to Marx and his writings, that makes me part of the bourgeoisie because of my attitudes. And in a social society, I need to be taken out. I need to either be jailed and put in a gulag so you can never hear me again, or I just need to be killed. Because those ideas don't conform to Marxism and socialism. So you don't have to be rich to be part of the bourgeoisie. You just have to have the right ideas. And Vox is totally just off the rocker. They are so far left. I don't know how they even got a following that actually thinks for themselves. I really don't. And it's just it amazes me, folks, how these people can just continually do this. Please go over to the DanClementShow.com and the show notes page and check out the notes for the show. They're, like I said, they're totally referenced. Any article that I talked about today and more There's a good article that's going to be over there, Reflections of the Failure of Socialism. It's a long PDF, but it's worth reading, folks. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. And folks, on Sunday, please attend the church of God's choice, not your choice. Have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you Monday at noon.